Okinawa, a jewel in the East China Sea, a blend of cultures and history. Rina Shimabukuro, a driven young professional, navigated the bustling streets of Yuruma. She had a full day at her office, a testament to her ambition and independence. Her relationship with Kenneth, a former Marine, had blossomed into a loving partnership. They shared a comfortable life, weekends filled with laughter and shared passions. Yet, beneath the surface, a subtle unease had begun to creep in for Kenneth. He'd wrestled with dark thoughts since childhood, unsettling fantasies that now felt amplified. He sent Rina a simple message before bed, a casual check-in. It was marked as read. Scene 2. The night of April 28 unfolded with chilling swiftness. Rina, seeking a moment of clarity after a long day, decided on a solitary walk. Around 8 p.m., the city began to quiet. It was a common occurrence in Okinawa, where life often continued well into the night. But this night was different. As Rina walked along the canal, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. A swift, brutal attack. A sharp object struck her from behind. Her cries for help were met with silence. The industrial area, usually a hub of late-night activity, seemed to hold its breath. Scene 3. The discovery sent shockwaves through Okinawa and Japan. Weeks later, DNA testing confirmed the horrifying truth: the body found in the black suitcase was Rina Shimabukuro. The brutality of the crime, the senselessness of it all, ignited a firestorm of grief and outrage. The Okinawan community, known for its warmth and hospitality, was shattered. Protests erupted, demanding justice. Kenneth, heartbroken and consumed by guilt, offered a full confession to the authorities. He spoke of his inner demons, the disturbing thoughts that had haunted him for years. Scene 4. The court delivered its verdict: life imprisonment. The sentence echoed the profound sense of loss and the community's demand for accountability. The case of Rina Shimabukuro became a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface, even in the most idyllic settings. The U.S. military presence in Okinawa, a long-standing factor in the island's social dynamics, added another layer of complexity to the tragedy. The incident reignited old wounds, forcing a reckoning with the island's history and its ongoing relationship with the United States. Scene 5. Years have passed since Rina's tragic death. The wounds are still raw, the questions linger. Why Rina? Why then? The investigation revealed Kenneth's troubled past, but it didn't fully explain the sudden, violent act. Digital forensics uncovered unsettling details about his online activity, hinting at a deeper, darker world. The red SUV, initially a fleeting detail in the surveillance footage, now represents a crucial piece of the puzzle. The case remains open, with investigators continuing to explore every avenue, seeking a complete understanding of what transpired on that fateful night. The digital forensics report was a tangled web of encrypted files and deleted communications. Detective Kenji Tanaka, haunted by the Shimabukuro case, pored over the data, seeking a thread, any thread, that could unravel the remaining mystery. Kenneth Sato, the convicted killer, remained a stone wall, offering no remorse, no explanation. His lawyers argued diminished capacity, citing a history of mental instability, but Kenji felt a deeper darkness at play. The digital trail led him to a series of anonymous online forums, discussions centered around obscure philosophies and radical ideologies. A fringe group, obsessed with concepts of purification and societal cleansing, had been subtly influencing Sato for months. They preyed on his vulnerabilities, his loneliness, his simmering resentment. Kenji felt a chilling realization: Sato wasn't acting alone. He was a pawn, manipulated by forces he barely understood. The investigation broadened, venturing into the shadowy corners of the internet, uncovering a network of individuals with disturbing beliefs. The more Kenji dug, the more he realized the Shimabukuro case was just one piece of a much larger, more sinister puzzle. A puzzle that threatened to expose a deep rot within the seemingly tranquil facade of Japanese society. Dr. Akari Nakamura, a renowned psychologist, was brought in to assess Kenneth Sato. While the court had ruled him guilty, Akari believed a deeper understanding of his psyche was crucial. She delved into his childhood, uncovering a history of neglect and emotional abuse. His parents, pillars of the community, had subtly stifled his individuality, pushing him towards a path of conformity. Akari discovered recurring themes of feeling insignificant, of being unseen. The online forums, she theorized, offered a twisted sense of belonging, a validation of his feelings of worthlessness. But something didn't quite fit. Sato's actions during the crime were far too calculated, too precise for someone suffering from simple mental instability. Akari found subtle markers of planning, of meticulous preparation, suggesting a level of control that defied his presented mental state. She suspected a carefully constructed facade, a deliberate presentation of instability to mitigate his guilt. The deeper she probed, the more she sensed a carefully guarded secret, a hidden layer of motivation that Sato was desperately trying to conceal. She realized the online group wasn't just influencing him, they were grooming him, meticulously shaping him into a vessel for their own dark agenda. Kenji followed the digital breadcrumbs to a secluded island off the coast of Okinawa. The island was home to a small, exclusive community of individuals who shared the same radical ideologies as the online forum. They lived a secluded life, shielded from the outside world, fostering a sense of self-righteousness and superiority. He discovered their leader, a charismatic and enigmatic figure named Hiroki Sato, Kenneth's estranged older brother. Hiroki, a respected academic and philanthropist, presented a picture of impeccable integrity. But Kenji unearthed evidence of Hiroki funding the online forum, subtly guiding its narrative, and manipulating Kenneth into carrying out the crime. The motive wasn't simply a random act of violence, it was a calculated attempt to destabilize the community, to create a catalyst for their radical vision of a purified society. Hiroki believed Rina Shimabukuro represented everything that was wrong with modern society, its perceived decadence, its lack of traditional values. Kenneth, manipulated by his brother's ideology and fueled by years of resentment, had been the instrument of his vengeance. Kenji felt a cold dread. He had solved the case of Rina Shimabukuro, but the darkness he had uncovered was far from contained. Kenji confronted Hiroki with the evidence. Hiroki didn't deny his involvement. He spoke with chilling calm about the need for radical change, about the sacrifices required to achieve a better future. He saw Rina as a symbol, a necessary casualty in the fight against societal decay. She was a symptom, Detective, Hiroki said, his voice smooth and controlled. A small price to pay for a greater good. Kenji felt a wave of nausea. Hiroki's intellect, his charisma, made him even more terrifying than Kenneth. He argued that Hiroki's actions were a betrayal of everything he represented: education, community, respect. Hiroki countered that traditional values were being eroded, that society had become complacent and corrupt. He believed that only drastic measures could restore order. The conversation escalated, a clash between two opposing worldviews. Kenji realized he wasn't just dealing with a criminal, he was confronting a dangerous ideology, a deeply ingrained belief system that threatened the very fabric of society. The case of Rina Shimabukuro had exposed a festering wound, and Hiroki Sato was its architect. Kenji knew bringing Hiroki to justice wouldn't solve everything. The ideology that fueled him still lingered, a dangerous undercurrent in Japanese society. But it was a start. He walked towards the police boat, the weight of the file heavy in his hand. It contained the evidence, irrefutable proof of Hiroki's manipulation, his orchestration of Rina's murder, and his dangerous ideology. He looked back at the island, now shrouded in darkness. The fight wasn't over. The shadows remained. He had brought one darkness to light, but countless others still lurked. The memory of Rina Shimabukuro fueled his resolve. He vowed to continue the fight, to protect the innocent, to ensure that no one else suffered the same fate. The case of Rina Shimabukuro was closed, but the pursuit of justice, the fight against darkness, would continue. He cast the file into the sea, a symbolic release of the burden he carried, and a promise to keep searching for the truth. The boat ride back to Okinawa was silent, punctuated only by the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. Kenji stared out at the dark water, the island receding into the night. Hiroki remained impassive, his gaze fixed on a point just beyond Kenji's shoulder. "They won't understand," Hiroki finally said, his voice soft but firm. "They'll call it extremism, but it's simply necessary. The old ways are failing. The system is broken. Kenji sighed. He understood Hiroki's conviction, the desperate yearning for something more. But the path Hiroki advocated was paved with destruction. He thought of Rina, her bright spirit extinguished. The weight of that loss pressed down on him. He knew dismantling the ideology itself would be a far greater challenge than bringing Hiroki to justice. It lived in the hearts of many, whispering promises of a better world, even if those promises were built on fear and division. He had exposed one cell in a vast network. Now, he had to find a way to dismantle the whole structure. The police boat slowed as it approached the harbor. The first rays of dawn were beginning to paint the sky a pale gray. Kenji felt a weariness settle over him, a profound sense of responsibility. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of a long and arduous fight. Days turned into weeks. Kenji continued his work, meticulously piecing together the fragmented network Hiroki had helped build. He spent hours poring over online forums, tracing digital connections, and interviewing former forum members who had since gone silent. The island community, once a haven of secrecy, was now fractured. Some were defiant, clinging to Hiroki's ideals. Others were fearful, trying to distance themselves from the fallout. He discovered that Hiroki wasn't acting alone. There were others, shadowy figures who provided resources and guidance, individuals who operated from the fringes of society, pulling the strings from the darkness. The online forum, it turned out, was just the tip of the iceberg. The ideology had seeped into unexpected places, local businesses, community organizations, even some segments of the government. The realization was chilling. This wasn't just about one man's extremism, it was about a deeply rooted societal malaise. He felt increasingly isolated, a lone figure battling a tide of deeply held beliefs. The marketplace was a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds, vibrant colors, the aroma of food, the chatter of voices. But Kenji saw only potential threats, hidden agendas, and the lingering shadows of Hiroki's influence. Seeking a deeper understanding of Rina, Kenji sought out her former teacher, Mrs. Sato. The tea house was a sanctuary of calm, a world away from the chaos Kenji had been navigating. Mrs. Sato, her face etched with wisdom and sorrow, spoke softly of Rina's idealism, her unwavering belief in a better world. Rina was so full of hope, she said, her voice trembling. She wanted to change things, to make a difference. But she was also vulnerable. Easily swayed by promises of quick solutions. Mrs. Sato explained that many young people felt lost, disillusioned by the economic hardship and social inequality plaguing Japan. They were searching for meaning, for purpose. And Hiroki's message, however twisted, offered a seductive sense of belonging and empowerment. He preyed on their fears, she said. He offered them a vision of strength, of control. But it was a false promise, built on hatred and division. Mrs. Sato's words resonated with Kenji. He realized that Hiroki wasn't just a dangerous ideologue, he was capitalizing on a deep-seated sense of despair. The fight wasn't just about arresting criminals, it was about addressing the underlying issues that made people susceptible to radicalism. Back in his office, Kenji meticulously reviewed the surveillance footage he'd collected. Hours blurred into a relentless search for connections, for patterns. He focused on the individuals who had interacted with Hiroki, trying to identify anyone who might be playing a more significant role. Then he saw it, a subtle, almost imperceptible pattern. Several individuals, seemingly unconnected, were attending the same obscure meetings in different regions of Japan. These meetings weren't advertised, they were whispered about, organized through encrypted channels. The attendees were diverse, business executives, academics, even a few politicians. It was a network far larger and more sophisticated than he had initially imagined. This wasn't just a fringe movement, it was a deeply embedded conspiracy, reaching into the highest echelons of society. The realization sent a chill down Kenji's spine. He had only scratched the surface. The true extent of Hiroki's influence was far greater than he had ever anticipated. He felt a growing sense of urgency. He needed to expose this network before it could inflict further damage. The clock was ticking. Kenji returned to the secluded cove on the island, the place where Hiroki had laid out his grand vision for a new Japan. He meticulously searched the area, retracing Hiroki's steps, looking for any overlooked clues. And then he found it, a hidden compartment concealed beneath a loose rock. Inside, he discovered a collection of documents, meticulously detailed plans to destabilize the Japanese economy, incite social unrest, and ultimately, seize control. The documents outlined a series of coordinated attacks on key infrastructure, financial institutions, and government agencies. It was a chillingly detailed blueprint for chaos. Hiroki hadn't just been preaching ideology, he had been actively plotting to dismantle the nation from within. Kenji felt a surge of adrenaline, mixed with a profound sense of dread. This was far bigger than he could have imagined. He knew he had stumbled upon something truly dangerous, something that threatened the very stability of Japan. The fight had just become exponentially more complex. He had to act quickly, before Hiroki's plans could be put into motion. The box was the key, Mrs. Sato had implied, a tangible piece of Hiroki's ideology. Kenji zoomed in on the image, enhancing the details. The man's face was obscured by shadow, but the box, it was intricately carved with symbols Kenji didn't recognize. They felt ancient, unsettling. He cross-referenced the symbols with historical texts, searching for any mention of their origin or meaning. Days bled into nights fueled by coffee and a growing sense of urgency. The footage revealed the man meeting with several individuals, wealthy businessmen, influential politicians, and shadowy figures who seemed to operate outside the bounds of the law. Each meeting was brief, secretive, and always conducted in hushed tones. Kenji felt like he was peeling back layers of a dangerous onion, each layer revealing a more disturbing truth. He discovered a recurring motif, a stylized bird with outstretched wings, subtly incorporated into the backgrounds of the meetings. This symbol, he realized with a jolt, was associated with a clandestine organization rumored to have ties to organized crime and political corruption. The box, he suspected, likely contained something that could expose their network. But what? And who was the mysterious man who guarded it? A cold dread began to settle in Kenji's stomach. The box was heavier than it looked, crafted from dark, polished wood. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings, a bewildering array of birds in flight and swirling patterns that seemed to shift and change in the light. Kenji carefully carried the box back to his office, his mind racing. He needed to understand its contents, but he also needed to be cautious. This wasn't just a box, it was a symbol, a repository of secrets. He consulted with a specialist in ancient languages and symbols, Dr. Anya Sharma. She studied the carvings with a magnifying glass, her brow furrowed in concentration. These symbols, she said, are pre-Tokugawa. They belong to a forgotten sect, a group rumored to have possessed knowledge of unconventional power. Unconventional power? Kenji pressed her for details, but Dr. Sharma was hesitant. The legends are vague, Kenji. They speak of manipulating energies, of influencing events from the shadows. It's all very esoteric. She warned him that tampering with such artifacts could have unforeseen consequences. Kenji ignored her warning. He felt compelled to know what was inside. The weight of Hiroki's vision, of the potential danger it represented, pressed heavily on him. He knew that whatever was in the box could change everything. With trembling hands, Kenji lifted the lid. It wasn't filled with gold or jewels, as he'd half expected. Instead, nestled on a bed of faded crimson silk, lay a collection of intricately designed metal gears, tiny, precise, and gleaming with an unnatural sheen. And at the center, a small, obsidian orb, perfectly smooth and cold to the touch. The gears were unlike anything he'd ever seen. They weren't part of any known mechanism, their purpose was utterly baffling. The orb pulsed with a faint, inner light, a subtle thrumming sensation that resonated in Kenji's palm. He felt a strange pull, an almost hypnotic fascination with the object. Dr. Sharma was stunned. These gears, she breathed, they're not mechanical in the traditional sense. They seem to resonate with energy. And the orb, it's a focal point. She theorized that the box contained components for a device, something designed to harness or manipulate some form of energy. Hiroki hadn't been building a new Japan with infrastructure, he'd been building something far more unpredictable. A device capable of influencing the very fabric of reality. Kenji spent days studying the orb. He ran countless tests, using sophisticated equipment, but nothing could explain its properties. It defied conventional physics. The swirling energy it emitted wasn't electromagnetic or gravitational or anything he could readily identify. He felt himself becoming increasingly obsessed, losing sleep, neglecting his other cases. The orb seemed to call to him, whispering promises of power, of control. He started having vivid dreams, filled with strange symbols and fleeting images of a Japan transformed. He confided in no one, fearing they wouldn't believe him, or worse, would try to take the orb from him. He knew he was walking a dangerous path, teetering on the edge of something unknown. The line between investigation and obsession blurred with each passing hour. He felt the orb's influence growing stronger, subtly altering his thoughts, amplifying his desires. He found himself increasingly drawn to Hiroki's ideology, to the idea of a new Japan, not as a political movement, but as a personal quest for power. The city lights blurred below, a vast, glittering tapestry spread out beneath him. Kenji stood on the rooftop, the obsidian orb pulsing in his hand, its energy now radiating outwards, enveloping him in a warm, tingling sensation. He felt a surge of power, a sense of limitless potential. The whispers in his mind intensified, urging him to unleash the orb's full capabilities. He understood now. Hiroki hadn't sought to overthrow the government, he'd sought to reshape reality itself. The box, the gears, the orb, they were components of a machine designed to rewrite history, to create a new order. But at what cost? As the orb's energy surged through him, Kenji glimpsed a terrifying vision, a Japan transformed, but not into paradise. It was a Japan ruled by absolute power, a Japan devoid of freedom and compassion. The weight of his discovery crashed down on him. He had to stop Hiroki, even if it meant destroying the orb, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The city lights seemed to mock him, twinkling with an indifferent brilliance. The choice was his. The warmth intensified, not unpleasantly, but with an unsettling power. Images flooded Kenji's mind, not memories, but glimpses of other places, other times. Shifting landscapes, impossible architectures, and beings of pure energy flickered through his consciousness. It was overwhelming, a torrent of information he couldn't possibly process. He gasped, clutching the orb tighter, trying to anchor himself to reality. The city noises faded, replaced by a low hum resonating deep within his bones. He felt a strange connection to the orb, as if it were an extension of his own being. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an invitation. But to what? A shadow seemed to dance at the edge of his vision, a fleeting impression of something vast and ancient observing him. A prickle of fear ran down his spine, quickly followed by an irresistible curiosity. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that his life had irrevocably changed. The orb wasn't just a source of energy, it was a key. And he was about to unlock a door he never knew existed. The tingling sensation morphed into a subtle vibration, a rhythmic pulse mirroring the frantic beat of his heart. He had to understand. He needed to understand. The energy field intensified, expanding outwards to encompass the entire rooftop. The air crackled with unseen power, and the city lights shimmered as if viewed through heat haze. Kenji felt himself lifting, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. He wasn't flying, not in the conventional sense. It was more like being pulled, drawn upwards by an invisible force. The obsidian orb pulsed brighter, its light now casting intricate patterns on the surrounding buildings. The feeling wasn't frightening, but exhilarating, a sense of boundless possibility. He glanced back at the cityscape, a miniature world receding below. He was leaving it behind, stepping into the unknown. The visions in his mind sharpened, coalescing into clearer images of a swirling vortex of energy, a gateway, perhaps? That seemed to be forming directly above him. The shadow he had glimpsed earlier solidified, resolving into a vaguely humanoid form composed of pure light. It didn't speak, but Kenji felt a presence, a silent communication that bypassed language altogether. It was an invitation to journey, a promise of knowledge, and a subtle warning of dangers yet to come. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. He was no longer just Kenji, the scientist. He was something more. The vortex deposited Kenji onto a floating island amidst a breathtaking landscape unlike anything he could have imagined. Towering structures of crystal and metal spiraled upwards, connected by shimmering bridges of light. Bioluminescent plants pulsed with soft, ethereal colors, casting an otherworldly glow across the scene. The air hummed with an unseen energy, and strange, melodic sounds echoed from the depths of the cavern. The orb in his hand felt warm and steady, a comforting presence in this alien environment. The humanoid figure of light materialized beside him, its form shifting and reforming like liquid starlight. It gestured towards a path leading towards a colossal structure in the distance, a city built into the side of a massive crystal mountain. This was a place of immense power, a nexus of energy unlike anything he had ever encountered. He sensed a profound intelligence here, ancient and wise, but also tinged with a hint of melancholy. The figure communicated, not with words, but with thoughts, images of a civilization that had mastered the manipulation of energy, a society that had reached unimaginable heights of technological and spiritual advancement, and a catastrophic event that had led to its decline. Focusing on the orb, Kenji noticed intricate symbols etched onto its surface, symbols that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves before his eyes. They pulsed with a vibrant, internal light, mirroring the rhythm of the cavernous space. The figure of light inclined its form, as if encouraging him to interact with the symbols. He hesitated, a sense of trepidation washing over him. He didn't understand the language of these symbols, but he felt drawn to them, compelled to decipher their meaning. It was as if the orb was communicating directly with his mind, bypassing the need for conscious thought. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the glowing glyphs, feeling a strange resonance between his own energy and the orb's. As his hand made contact, a surge of information flooded his mind, not in words, but in pure, raw data. He saw schematics of complex energy systems, equations that defied conventional mathematics, and glimpses of the civilization's history, their triumphs, their mistakes, and their ultimate downfall. The information was overwhelming, but he managed to focus, to filter the noise and identify a recurring pattern. It seemed to be a sequence, a key to unlocking the orb's full potential. The symbols on the orb had unlocked a pathway, a shimmering gateway of pure energy that pulsed with untold power. It led to a realm beyond comprehension, a place where the laws of physics seemed to bend and break. The figure of light stood beside him, its form radiating a profound sense of both hope and sadness. "This is the way," it communicated, its thoughts echoing in Kenji's mind. "The knowledge you seek lies beyond. But be warned, the path is fraught with peril. The forces that led to our downfall still linger." Kenji took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the risks, but he couldn't turn back now. He had come too far, learned too much. He had a responsibility to use this knowledge to safeguard his own world. He looked at the figure of light, a silent acknowledgement of their shared burden. With a resolute nod, Kenji stepped towards the gateway, the obsidian orb held firmly in his hand. The figure of light offered a final, silent blessing, and then faded away, leaving Kenji alone in the shimmering light, ready to face the unknown. Hesitantly, Kenji reached out, his fingers brushing against the shimmering surface of the gateway. A surge of energy coursed through him, not painful, but intensely vibrant, like a million tiny sparks igniting within his veins. The figure of light beside him offered a silent gesture, a beckoning forward. Doubt warred with curiosity. Was this a path to salvation, or a descent into the unknown? He thought of his world, ravaged by the encroaching darkness. Could this be the answer? He took a deep breath, steeling his resolve. This was his only chance. With a final glance back at the floating island, a silent farewell to the familiar, Kenji stepped through the gateway. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors, a symphony of light and sound that defied description. He felt weightless, adrift in a sea of pure energy. The sensation was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for whatever lay ahead. The figure of light remained beside him, a constant presence in the swirling chaos. When Kenji opened his eyes, he found himself on a new island, smaller than the one he had left behind. The landscape was utterly alien. Floating islands dotted the horizon, each a unique ecosystem of strange flora and fauna. Bioluminescent plants illuminated the twilight sky with an array of colors he had never seen before. Creatures resembling winged serpents soared through the air, their scales shimmering like 1,000 rainbows. Crystal waterfalls plunged from the edges of the islands, disappearing into the swirling nebula below. The air hummed with an unseen energy, a palpable sense of magic. The figure of light remained at his side, its form now more defined, resembling a being of pure energy, yet somehow comforting. "Welcome, Kenji," the figure resonated, its voice a chorus of gentle chimes. "You have arrived at Ethel. A sanctuary, a refuge." Kenji struggled to comprehend the scale of this place. It was beyond anything he could have imagined. But a nagging feeling persisted. This place felt empty. Beautiful, yes, but devoid of life, of purpose. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure of light drifted closer, its energy patterns swirling like distant galaxies. "Ethel is a repository, a place where remnants of forgotten worlds reside. It is a sanctuary built to preserve knowledge and life from across the cosmos." It paused, and for a moment, Kenji sensed a hint of sadness within its luminous form. "But it has fallen into disrepair. The source of its energy, the heart of Ethel, is fading." The figure gestured towards a distant, larger island, a colossal structure of shimmering crystal that pulsed with a faint, dying light. "The darkness that plagues your world is not unique. It is a creeping blight that threatens all of existence. The heart of Ethel is the only thing that can stop it, but it requires a catalyst, a spark of life force to reignite." Kenji felt a surge of responsibility. He had come here seeking a solution for his world, and now he was being asked to save countless others. The weight of the universe seemed to settle upon his shoulders. As they journeyed towards the heart of Ethel, the vibrant landscape began to fade. The colors dulled, the bioluminescence dimmed, and the once lush flora withered. The floating islands grew smaller and more isolated, casting long, ominous shadows. Kenji noticed that the winged serpents were fewer, their scales losing their luster. The air grew colder, the hum of energy fading into an unsettling silence. "The blight is spreading," the figure of light said, its voice tinged with concern. "It consumes everything in its path, draining the life force from Ethel." Kenji felt a growing sense of urgency. They were running out of time. He looked around at the desolate landscape, a stark contrast to the breathtaking beauty he had witnessed upon arrival. He wondered if he had made the right choice coming here. Was he too late? The closer they got to the heart of Ethel, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. A sense of despair hung heavy in the air, threatening to overwhelm him. They arrived at the heart of Ethel, a colossal crystal structure that dominated the horizon. But it was not the radiant beacon he had expected. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, and its once brilliant light was now a faint, flickering ember. The air around it felt stagnant, lifeless. "This is it," the figure of light said. "The source of Ethel's power. But it is severely weakened." Kenji reached out and touched the crystal, feeling a faint pulse of energy beneath his fingertips. It was barely there, a whisper of what it once was. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice filled with determination. The figure of light looked at him, its energy patterns shifting with a newfound intensity. "You are the catalyst, Kenji. You carry within you the spark of life, the resilience of your world. You must channel that energy into the heart, reignite its core." The figure then extended a hand, its energy flowing towards Kenji. "Focus your will, Kenji. Believe in the power of life. Believe in hope." The fate of two worlds rested on his shoulders. The air grew heavy, charged with a sense of profound loss. "What happened here?" Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible above the faint hum emanating from the crystal. Kale ran a hand over a jagged fissure, the crystal surprisingly cold to the touch. "It's been corrupted," he replied grimly. "The energy flows are disrupted. Something has drained Ethel's life force." A faint, distorted image flickered within the crystal's depths, a fleeting glimpse of a swirling darkness. "That's not natural," Ilara stated, her hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of her blade. The protective barrier around them, once a vibrant shield, was now flickering erratically. A sense of urgency pulsed in the air. They needed to understand what had caused this decay, and quickly. The fading light hinted at a coming darkness, a silence more terrifying than any storm. The heart of Ethel, once a beacon of hope, was now a warning. Their journey to preserve knowledge had led them to a place teetering on the brink of oblivion. They had to find a way to restore it, or all the forgotten worlds it held would be lost forever. Cale scanned the area, his senses on high alert. He felt a subtle shift in the energy around them, a presence lurking just beyond their perception. Ilara's gaze remained fixed on the fractured crystal, a silent promise hardening her features. "We can't give up," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Ethel holds invaluable knowledge, the stories of civilizations lost to time. It's our responsibility to protect it." Cale nodded, his expression equally resolute. "But we need to be careful. This corruption, it feels sentient. Like a disease infecting the very essence of Ethel." He pulled out his energy pistol, a silent gesture of preparedness. "I'll create a perimeter. We need to analyze the energy signatures, understand the source of this disruption." Ilara began to circle the crystal, her senses attuned to any unusual activity. She noticed faint, almost imperceptible vibrations in the ground, as if something was stirring beneath the surface. The air smelled faintly of ozone and decay, a chilling combination. The flickering image within the crystal reappeared, clearer this time, a shadowy tendril reaching out, grasping at the remaining light. It felt like a predatory entity, feeding on the crystal's energy. They were not just facing a corrupted repository, they were facing a hostile force. Cale activated his energy shield, a shimmering barrier of pure energy enveloping Ilara. The shield pulsed with a soft, protective light, a stark contrast to the darkness encroaching upon Ethel. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice low and focused. "I don't know what we're dealing with, but it's clearly dangerous." He began scanning the area with his pistol, the device emitting a series of soft clicks and whirs. The vibrations in the ground intensified, growing into a low rumble. Dust and small stones began to fall from the decaying islands above. The shadowy tendril within the crystal pulsed with renewed energy, reaching further, attempting to break free. Ilara felt a prickling sensation on her skin, as if she were being watched. She scanned the barren landscape, searching for the source of the disturbance. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the rumble and the hum of the corrupted crystal. A sense of dread settled over her, they were not alone. Ilara's keen eyes caught a flicker of movement in the deep shadows between two of the decaying floating islands. A dark shape shifted, barely perceptible against the gray backdrop. "Cale," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Something's moving." Cale immediately shifted his focus, his energy pistol raised. He scanned the shadows, his senses on high alert. The rumble in the ground grew louder, accompanied by a faint, guttural growl. The shadowy tendril within the crystal pulsed violently, as if reacting to the disturbance. A dark figure began to emerge from the shadows, its form indistinct but undeniably menacing. It was tall and gaunt, with limbs that seemed too long and joints that bent at unnatural angles. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light. This was not a natural creature, it was a manifestation of the corruption, a guardian of the decaying crystal. "It's a guardian," Cale shouted, unleashing a volley of energy blasts at the creature. The blast slammed into its shadowy form, causing it to recoil with a hiss. Ilara moved swiftly, her blade a blur of silver as she lunged towards the creature. She aimed for a vulnerable point in its form, a spot where the shadows seemed to thin. The creature retaliated with a swipe of its long, clawed hand, forcing Ilara to dodge. Cale continued to fire energy blasts, keeping the creature at bay while Ilara sought an opening. The battle was fierce and desperate, a clash between light and darkness in the heart of a dying world. The corrupted crystal pulsed with energy, feeding the creature's power. They were outnumbered, outmatched, but they refused to yield. The fate of Ethel, and the knowledge it held, rested on their shoulders. The Guardian, a creature woven from shadow and solidified darkness, fully materialized. Its form was serpentine, vast and unsettling, with eyes that burned like embers in the gloom. A low growl emanated from it, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air of Ethel. Cale continued his barrage of energy blasts, each one impacting the creature with a resounding crackle. But the attacks seemed to have little effect, the shadows simply absorbing the energy. Ilara, meanwhile, circled, her movements fluid and precise. She observed the creature, searching for a weakness, a chink in its impenetrable armor of darkness. The vortex of dark energy around it intensified, pulsing with malevolent power. It was clear this was no ordinary beast, it was a conduit for something far more sinister. Kale noticed Ilara's focused gaze and shouted, "Ilara, be careful. It's drawing power from the rift." The rift, a Terran reality that had plagued Ethel for months, was the source of the encroaching darkness. This guardian was a manifestation of its power, a protector of the chaos. Ilara nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She knew they couldn't simply overpower the creature with brute force. They had to disrupt the flow of energy, sever the connection to the rift. With a burst of agility, Ilara launched herself forward, narrowly avoiding a sweeping tail that would have crushed her. The air crackled as she moved, her body a blur of motion against the backdrop of decaying islands. She targeted a point on the creature's chest, a pulsating note of dark energy that seemed to be the source of its power. Kale continued his relentless assault, unleashing a constant stream of energy blasts to keep the Guardian focused on him. "Focus on the chest!" Ilara yelled, her voice strained. The Guardian roared, a sound that echoed across the desolate landscape. It twisted and writhed, attempting to intercept Ilara, but she was too quick. She reached the creature, her blade rising in a swift arc. The blade met resistance, not solid flesh, but a dense field of shadow. A surge of dark energy slammed into her, throwing her back several feet. She landed hard, but quickly recovered, her eyes narrowed with determination. The creature seemed to anticipate her attack, its movements becoming more deliberate, more powerful. Seeing Ilara falter under the creature's assault, Kale reacted instantly. He channeled all his energy into a single, concentrated blast, firing it directly at the creature's chest. The blast struck true, creating a momentary opening in the creature's defenses. The surge of energy disrupted the flow of power, causing the Guardian to momentarily stagger. It was the opportunity Ilara needed. With renewed determination, she lunged forward, her blade finding its mark. She plunged the weapon deep into the glowing node on the creature's chest. A blinding flash of light erupted, followed by a deafening roar. The creature convulsed, its shadowy form flickering violently. The vortex of dark energy around it began to dissipate, the malevolent power slowly receding. The creature's roar faded into a whimper as the light subsided. The serpentine form began to shrink, its shadowy edges dissolving into nothingness. The vortex of dark energy collapsed, leaving behind only a faint lingering darkness that slowly dispersed into the atmosphere. The Guardian was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Ilara and Kale stood panting, their bodies aching from the exertion. They watched the dissipating darkness, a sense of relief washing over them. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the underlying problem, the rift, remained. The air felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere of Ethel slightly less heavy. "It's gone," Ilara breathed, leaning heavily on her blade. Kale nodded, his energy shield collapsing. "For now. But it won't be the last." Kale scanned their surroundings, his eyes searching for any sign of further threats. He noticed a new path opening between the floating islands, a previously obscured route now visible in the fading darkness. "There's a way forward," he said, pointing. "A less direct route to the Citadel." Ilara turned her gaze towards the rift, her expression resolute. The fight had been exhausting, but it had also reinforced her determination. "We need to close that rift, Kale," she stated, her voice firm. "This is just one manifestation of the darkness it's unleashing." Kale nodded in agreement. "Then let's not waste any time. The Citadel awaits." He started to move towards the new path, Ilara following close behind, their silhouettes stark against the darkening sky, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The air hung heavy with the scent of ozone and lingering fear. Ilara leaned heavily on Kale, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The relief of the creature's defeat was quickly overshadowed by the sheer exhaustion that washed over her. I don't know if I can go much further," she managed, her voice weak. Kale squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We're almost through, Ilara. Just a little further to the next island. This path, it feels different. Less tainted by the darkness. He studied the faint trail ahead, a series of shimmering energy strands barely visible against the swirling mists. A sense of unease settled within him. This newfound path felt unnatural, too easily revealed. He couldn't shake the feeling they were stepping into a carefully laid trap. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant whisper of the wind. He noticed a subtle shift in the clouds below, a darker patch coalescing in the distance. It was too deliberate to be a natural formation. "Ilara," Kale said, his voice low and urgent. "Be ready. Something doesn't feel right." He tightened his grip on his staff, the crystal at its tip pulsing with a faint, protective light. The journey wasn't over, it had merely entered a more treacherous phase. Kale's gaze remained fixed on the path ahead, his brow furrowed in concentration. He could feel a subtle pressure building in the air, a barely perceptible shift in the magical currents. The energy strands guiding the way seemed to pulse with an erratic rhythm, almost mocking him. He focused his energy, channeling it through his staff, seeking to discern the source of the disturbance. The crystal pulsed brighter, casting dancing shadows across his face. He sensed a presence, something watching them from the swirling mists below. It wasn't the same shadowy energy as the creature they had just vanquished, this felt colder, more calculating. He tightened his resolve. He wouldn't let Ilara down. He wouldn't allow this strange path to lead them into another ambush. He had to trust his instincts, to rely on the subtle whispers of the magic that flowed through him. He whispered an ancient warding spell, a protective measure designed to deflect unseen threats. The air around them shimmered momentarily, a barely visible shield forming between them and the unknown. He hoped it would be enough. They moved slowly, cautiously, along the narrow path. The air grew colder with each step, and the swirling clouds below seemed to press in on them, obscuring the view. The path itself was treacherous, the stone worn and uneven, with sheer drops on either side. Ilara struggled to keep up, her weakened state making each step a monumental effort. Kale scanned the surroundings constantly, his senses on high alert. The strange energy emanating from the path intensified, creating a disorienting effect. He felt a subtle tugging sensation, as if the path itself were trying to guide them towards something. He resisted the urge to follow, trusting his instincts instead. "Stay close," he instructed Ilara, his voice barely above a whisper. "And watch your footing." He noticed strange symbols etched into the stone of the path, symbols he didn't recognize. They seemed to writhe and shift in his peripheral vision, as if alive. He felt a growing sense of dread, a premonition that they were entering a place where the rules of reality no longer applied. The path abruptly opened into a hidden clearing. The swirling clouds parted momentarily, revealing a sight that stole Ilara's breath. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient structure, a crumbling edifice of obsidian and silver, partially obscured by the mists. It looked as though it had been swallowed by the very landscape. A faint, ethereal light emanated from within, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat. The air in the clearing hummed with power, a palpable energy that vibrated through their very bones. Kale felt a surge of apprehension. This place felt sacred, yet deeply unsettling. The structure exuded an aura of immense age and forgotten knowledge. He couldn't discern any obvious entrances, only crumbling walls and shattered archways. The ethereal light seemed to beckon them forward, promising answers, but also hinting at untold dangers. A low, resonant chanting echoed from within the structure, a sound that resonated deep within their souls. Ilara stared at the ancient structure, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The ethereal light seemed to draw her in, promising solace and understanding. But a flicker of fear danced in her eyes. What is that place?" she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and trepidation. Kale stood protectively behind her, his staff raised, ready to defend against any threat. He sensed a powerful presence within the structure, something ancient and enigmatic. He didn't know what awaited them inside, but he knew they had to be prepared. He placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder, offering silent reassurance. "I don't know," he replied, his voice firm. "But we'll face it together." He took a step forward, his senses heightened, ready to confront whatever secrets the ancient structure held. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, as if urging them to enter. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery, but they had come too far to turn back now. Ilara's voice trembled, barely audible above the whisper of the wind. What is that place? Kale stepped closer, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his sword, though he didn't draw it. The structure seemed to pulse with a faint, internal energy, the silver veins within the obsidian glowing brighter. Runes, unlike any language Ilara had ever seen, spiraled across its surface. They felt ancient, powerful, and strangely familiar. A sense of unease settled over her, a feeling that they were trespassing on something sacred, something not meant for mortal eyes. The air crackled with static electricity, raising the hairs on her arms. I don't know, Kale admitted, his gaze fixed on the structure. But I have a feeling we need to be careful. This place, it feels watched. A low hum resonated from the obsidian, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. The swirling clouds above began to coalesce, forming a vortex directly above the structure. A single beam of intense blue light shot down, illuminating the top of the edifice. Ilara shielded her eyes, a gasp escaping her lips. The light felt intelligent, aware. The light intensified, bathing Ilara's face in its ethereal glow. She felt a strange pull, a yearning to step forward and embrace the unknown. Images flickered in her mind, swirling galaxies, ancient cities, faces she didn't recognize but felt intimately connected to. It was overwhelming, a torrent of information flooding her senses. Kale grabbed her arm, his grip firm. Ilara! Are you all right? He saw the turmoil in her eyes, the struggle to maintain control. He knew, instinctively, that this place was affecting her, tapping into something deep within her soul. I don't know, she stammered, pulling away slightly. It's showing me things. Memories, perhaps? But they're not mine. The humming grew louder, resonating within her very bones. The runes on the structure seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, forming patterns that mirrored the images in her mind. She felt a presence, not malevolent, but undeniably powerful, observing them. A voice, not audible but felt directly in her mind, whispered a single word, welcome. Kale tightened his grip on Ilara's arm, his jaw set. He didn't trust this place, but he wouldn't let her face it alone. He had vowed to protect her, and that vow wouldn't be broken. Whatever this is, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his heart, we face it together. He scanned the clearing, searching for any sign of danger. The swirling clouds continued to churn above, the blue light intensifying. He noticed small, shimmering particles drifting down from the vortex, like stardust. They seemed to be drawn towards the structure, coalescing into fleeting shapes, faces, symbols, scenes from forgotten worlds. He felt a prickle of unease. This wasn't just a display of power, it felt like an invitation. An invitation laced with danger. He knew they were walking a tightrope, one wrong step could mean oblivion. He prepared himself for a fight, though he suspected a sword might be useless against something so ancient and otherworldly. The silver runes on the obsidian structure flared with blinding intensity. The humming reached a crescendo, shaking the very foundations of the clearing. The air crackled with energy, and the swirling clouds above seemed to converge directly over the edifice. A section of the obsidian wall began to shimmer and dissolve, revealing a dark, seemingly bottomless doorway. The blue light emanating from within intensified, revealing a glimpse of a vast, cavernous space. Strange, geometric patterns covered the walls of the chamber, pulsing with the same ethereal light. The air pouring from the doorway was cool and carried a faint scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and indescribably alien. Ilara gasped, feeling a powerful pull towards the opening. The voice in her mind returned, stronger this time. Come, embrace your destiny. Ilara took a hesitant step forward, then another, drawn inexorably towards the open doorway. Kale reached out, desperately trying to stop her, but his hand passed right through her as if she were a phantom. Ilara, no, he shouted, his voice lost in the roar of the wind and the humming of the structure. But it was too late. She stepped across the threshold, disappearing into the darkness within. The doorway shimmered and then vanished, the obsidian wall reforming as if it had never been breached. The blue light subsided, and the swirling clouds above began to dissipate, revealing a star-filled night sky. Kale stood alone in the clearing, the silence deafening. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that Ilara was gone, lost to a place beyond his comprehension. His quest had just taken a terrifying turn. Kale watched in horror as Ilara was pulled into the vortex. It wasn't a violent yank, but a gentle, insistent tug, like the tide drawing the sea towards it. He felt a strange pressure in his chest, a sickening lurch as if a part of him was being dragged along with her. He strained, trying to grab her, his fingers grasping at empty air. The runes on the structure pulsed with an unholy light, their silver glow casting grotesque shadows that danced around the clearing. The humming intensified, morphing into a mournful wail that echoed through the trees. He couldn't move, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and a desperate, aching helplessness. What was happening to her? Where was she being taken? He had to get to her, but how? He felt a growing sense of dread, a certainty that this was far beyond anything he had ever encountered. This wasn't just a magical portal, it felt like something ancient and powerful, something that defied understanding. He closed his eyes for a moment, battling the rising panic. He had promised to protect her. He would find her. He would unravel this mystery, no matter the cost. Opening his eyes, Kale forced himself to focus. Panic wouldn't help. He needed to think, to analyze. He began running his hands along the obsidian surface, meticulously examining the runes. They weren't just decorative, he sensed a complex language woven into their design. He recognized fragments of ancient glyphs, symbols he'd only seen in dusty tomes in the royal library. They spoke of gateways, of realms beyond mortal comprehension, of sacrifices and binding rituals. The air grew colder, and a faint scent of ozone filled his nostrils. He noticed a slight indentation in one of the runes, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. It felt different. Warmer than the surrounding stone. He pressed his thumb against it, and a faint click echoed through the clearing. A section of the obsidian structure shimmered, revealing a hidden panel. Inside the hidden panel, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a small wooden box. It was exquisitely crafted, the wood dark and polished, inlaid with silver filigree. Kale's heart pounded as he carefully lifted the lid. Inside, resting on the velvet lining, was a crystal. Not just any crystal, this one pulsed with an inner light, a soft, ethereal glow that seemed to breathe. It shifted through colors, blues, greens, violets, like captured starlight. The light felt familiar. He reached out, hesitantly, and picked it up. As his fingers closed around it, a surge of energy flowed through him, a jolt of power that made him gasp. Images flooded his mind, swirling landscapes, strange creatures, a feeling of immense distance. The crystal hummed in his hand, resonating with something deep within him. It felt like a key, a guide, a connection to the realm where Ilara had been taken. Focusing all his will, Kale concentrated on the images swirling in his mind. He sifted through the chaos, searching for a recognizable landmark, a familiar feeling. He thought of Ilara, her laughter, her smile, her unwavering spirit. He pictured her face, and the images in his mind sharpened, coalesced. He saw a landscape of impossible beauty, towering crystal spires, floating islands, and rivers of liquid light. And within that landscape, a faint glimmer of her presence. As he focused, the swirling vortex began to shrink, the chaotic energy slowly calming. A faint path of light appeared within it, a shimmering tunnel leading into the unknown. It wasn't a random portal anymore, it was a gateway, a pathway. The crystal in his hand pulsed brighter, guiding him, urging him forward. Taking a deep breath, Kale stepped into the shrinking portal, the crystal held tightly in his hand. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors, a dizzying rush of sensation. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. He stumbled, regaining his footing on solid ground. He gasped, taking in the breathtaking vista before him. Towering crystal spires pierced the sky, their surfaces shimmering with an internal light. Floating islands drifted lazily overhead, connected by bridges of pure energy. Rivers of liquid light flowed through valleys filled with strange, bioluminescent plants. It was a landscape of impossible beauty, a realm of dreams. And there, in the distance, he saw her. Ilara stood near a crystalline waterfall, looking lost and confused, but unharmed. The crystal in his hand pulsed warmly, guiding him towards her. The portal had vanished, leaving him stranded in this alien world, but he wasn't alone. The air shimmered, the scent of wildflowers thick and sweet. Kale blinked, adjusting to the gentle sunlight. He stood on soft grass, the air vibrant with life, a stark contrast to the shadowy chamber he'd left behind. Before him lay a city of impossible beauty, towers of crystal and gold rising from a landscape painted in hues he'd never seen. It pulsed with a soft, internal light, a beacon of hope. He recognized it instantly, Ethelgard, the city of his ancestors, the place Ilara had spoken of in whispers. As he took a hesitant step forward, Ilara appeared beside him, seemingly materialized from the very air. Her smile was radiant, her eyes filled with a warmth that chased away the lingering fear. "Welcome home, Kale," she said, her voice like the chime of distant bells. "I knew you would find your way." She reached for his hand, her touch sending a surge of energy through him, a feeling of belonging he'd never known. "But, how?" Kale stammered, overwhelmed. "The portal, the box," Ilara gently squeezed his hand. The box held not just a key, but a memory. A memory of our shared lineage, a connection severed by time and circumstance. The portal was a conduit, activated by your will, by your longing. She gestured towards the city. "Ethelgard has been waiting." The path to reclaiming Ethelgard wouldn't be easy. Ilara explained that a shadow had fallen over the city centuries ago, a creeping darkness that threatened to consume its light. An ancient artifact, the Sunstone, had been lost, and without it, Ethelgard's protective barrier was weakening. The darkness fed on doubt and despair, slowly eroding the city's vibrant energy. Kale, emboldened by Ilara's unwavering faith in him, agreed to help. He wasn't a warrior, not in the traditional sense, but he possessed a strength of spirit, a resilience forged in hardship. He had the key, the memory, the connection, and Ilara had the knowledge, the history, the unwavering belief in his potential. Together, they began their quest, exploring the ancient ruins and forgotten pathways of Ethelgard. They faced trials that tested their courage and their bond. They battled shadowy creatures born of fear, solved riddles guarded by ancient spirits, and navigated treacherous landscapes. With each challenge overcome, Kale felt his own power growing, fueled by Ilara's love and the city's unwavering hope. He was no longer just Kale, the wanderer, he was Kale, the descendant, the protector, the hope of Ethelgard. The darkness would not prevail. Their journey led them to the heart of Ethelgard, to the Elderwood, a colossal tree whose roots delved deep into the very foundations of the city. The tree pulsed with a faint, ethereal light, its bark covered in ancient runes. Ilara explained that the Sunstone was hidden within the Elderwood, protected by a powerful enchantment. The enchantment responded to pure intent, to a heart filled with selfless love. To access the Sunstone, Kale had to undergo a trial, a test of his character, his resolve, his willingness to sacrifice. He had to confront his deepest fears, his past regrets, and his own self-doubt. He closed his eyes, focusing on Ilara's face, on the warmth of her smile, on the hope she represented. He embraced his vulnerability, acknowledging his flaws, and offering them to the Elderwood. The runes on the bark flared brighter, bathing the clearing in golden light. A hidden compartment opened within the tree's trunk, revealing the Sunstone, a crystal radiating warmth and power. As Kale reached for it, a wave of energy surged through him, cleansing and invigorating. He felt a profound sense of peace, a deep connection to his ancestors and to the city he was sworn to protect. Holding the Sunstone, Kale felt its power flowing through him, a surge of warmth that banished the shadows within. The city of Ethelgard responded, its light intensifying, its protective barrier strengthening. The creeping darkness began to recede, driven back by the Sunstone's radiant energy. The air crackled with renewed life, with hope, with the promise of a brighter future. With the Sunstone restored, Ethelgard began to heal. The shadows dissipated, the land blossomed, and the people rejoiced. Kale, no longer a stranger, was embraced as a hero, a savior. But his greatest reward was Ilara's love, her unwavering support, her belief in him. He had found his home, his purpose, and his destiny. He looked at Ilara, his heart overflowing with gratitude. "We did it," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. We saved Ethelgard. Ilara smiled, her eyes shining with pride. We did it together, she replied, reaching for his hand. Years passed. Kael and Ilara ruled Ethelgard with wisdom and compassion, ushering in an era of peace and prosperity. The city flourished, its light shining brightly across the land. Kael embraced his role as protector, a bridge between the past and the future, a symbol of hope for generations to come. He and Ilara remained inseparable, their love a beacon of light in the heart of Ethelgard. One day, standing hand in hand in the Elderwood, bathed in the warm glow of the sunstone, Kael knew he had found his true home. He had overcome his fears, embraced his destiny, and found love in the most unexpected of places. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had led into this, a life filled with purpose, with love, and with the enduring legacy of Ethelgard. And as he looked into Ilara's eyes, he knew that their story, their love, would continue to shine brightly for eternity.